The morning had begun like any other, quiet and unassuming. The sun had barely risen over the city skyline, casting soft golden rays across my small garden, brushing the leaves with a warm glow. I, Richard Miller, 67 years old, widower for 5 years, had risen promptly at 6 as always. There was a comforting rhythm to my mornings, the hum of the kettle, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the familiar click of the suitcase latch as I double-checked my belongings for the third time. Emily had been gone for 5 years, but her absence still echoed in every corner of the house we had built together. Every wall, every creaking floorboard, every photograph reminded me of her. Our life together had been full of laughter, love, and countless memories, and I clung to those memories like lifelines in a world that sometimes felt empty without her. The house we shared, the home that had once resounded with the laughter of our son Daniel as a child, now seemed quiet in a way that pressed against my chest. Today was supposed to be different. My younger sister in Florida had insisted that I visit her for a short escape from the house. "Richard, you need to get out of that house. You need to breathe again. You need something new," she had told me over the phone countless times. Emily would have agreed had she still been alive. She always said that life was about signs and intuition, and I had learned to respect both over the years. So I had planned the trip carefully, bought my tickets weeks in advance, and packed meticulously. I left the house at 8, hailed a taxi, and gave the driver the airport address. The streets passed beneath the tires in familiar patterns. I watched the neighborhood, noting the small changes here and there, the new fence at the neighbor's yard, the freshly painted mailbox down the street, and I felt a quiet satisfaction. This was my city. These were my streets. And today I was supposed to leave them behind for a brief while. The airport was chaotic as usual, crowded with travelers rushing past one another, announcements blaring through the speakers, and the low hum of conversations merging into a constant murmur. I checked in, navigated through security, and settled into the waiting area with my favorite book in hand. My flight was scheduled for 11, but at 10:30 a voice over the loudspeaker shattered my calm. Flight 472 to Miami is canceled due to technical problems with the aircraft. Passengers may be rescheduled for the next available flight. A wave of frustration hit me, but beneath it, a strange sense of foreboding. Something told me not to wait. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was a faint whisper of intuition, a lingering voice of experience that had guided me through the years. I made the decision immediately. I would return home. The taxi ride back was unusually long, filled with a tense silence as I watched familiar streets pass by. Something felt wrong, though I couldn't place it at first. When I turned onto my street, the feeling became undeniable. There was a large moving truck parked directly in front of my driveway. At first, I thought perhaps a neighbor was moving, or had rented the truck for some purpose. But the moment I noticed the open back door, the sight of furniture stacked and covered in blankets, my stomach sank. Panic rose like a tidal wave inside me, crushing my chest with the weight of an unbearable truth. Something was horribly wrong. I paid the driver, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the bills, and stepped out onto the driveway. Each step toward the house felt heavier than the last. The air was thick, heavy with anticipation and dread. And then I saw them. Kneeling by my front door, tools in hand, were Daniel and Jessica. My son, my only son, the boy I had raised, the boy I had held during nightmares and comforted through childhood fears, and his wife, focused on forcing the lock of my own home. Behind them inside the truck lay a collection of my life's possessions. My furniture, boxes wrapped in blankets, items I had accumulated over decades. For a moment, my mind refused to accept the reality before me. It was impossible, unimaginable. But the metallic crash of tools falling to the ground as I shouted cut through the fog of disbelief. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" My voice rang through the afternoon air, sharp, unrelenting, filled with the raw edge of betrayal. Daniel froze, the color draining from his face. Jessica's eyes darted nervously between me and the truck, searching for an excuse, any excuse, to explain what could not be explained. "Dad, we were just—" she stammered, the words faltering as panic overtook her. But I could not hear. I could not comprehend. My heart thudded violently, each beat a hammering reminder that the people I trusted most were attempting to rob me. Memories of my life, Emily's laughter, Daniel's childhood milestones, the celebrations, the quiet evenings spent together, rushed past me, each one stabbed through with the pain of betrayal. I demanded answers, my voice shaking but insistent. Daniel tried to explain, but the panic in his eyes betrayed him. The planning, the waiting for me to leave, the cold calculation. It was all there, revealed in a single glance between him and Jessica. This was not an impulsive act. It was deliberate. It was premeditated. And as I stood there in the driveway, staring at the moving truck, the half-empty house, and the people I loved the most attempting to destroy my life, I felt something inside me break, a fracture deep and raw that would never fully heal. I realized in that gut-wrenching moment that life had changed forever. The betrayal was not just of possessions, not just of property. It was of trust, of family, of everything I had held sacred. And the road ahead, I knew, would be one of confrontation, of reckoning, and of facing a truth I never thought I would have to face. My own son was willing to betray me. The moment I stepped closer to the truck, the weight of reality pressed down on me like a tidal wave. My legs trembled, not just from shock, but from the overwhelming knowledge that my life, the life Emily and I had built together, was being dismantled before my eyes. Each item I saw was a piece of history, a fragment of memory, a story of love, of joy, and of shared existence. And now all of it lay in the hands of my son and his wife, people I trusted most. I could see the dining room chairs we had bought for our 10th anniversary, the table my father had left me, the sideboard Emily had polished for decades. Each item seemed to glare at me accusingly, asking silently how someone could betray the sanctity of family, the sacredness of trust. My fingers itched to touch them, to reclaim them, but at the same time a deep, heavy sorrow anchored me to the spot. I remembered the first time we bought that dining set. Daniel was just 8 years old, eager to help me choose the perfect chairs for our anniversary. He had run around the furniture store, testing each chair, climbing onto them with uncontainable excitement. Emily laughed and shook her head, calling him a little whirlwind of energy. How different those days felt now, how impossibly far away they seemed in the face of what I was witnessing. I turned my gaze to the moving boxes, some of them already labeled with scrawled handwriting that made my stomach turn. My books, Emily's favorite novels and my old classics, were stacked precariously, ready to be sold or discarded. My mother's radio, worn and scratched from decades of use, was tucked among other miscellaneous objects as if it were nothing. And there, wrapped in a blanket, were the antique lamps we had discovered together in that thrift district 30 years ago. Lamps that had illuminated our home during countless birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet nights. Daniel, Jessica. Why? I whispered more to myself than to them. My voice quavered, trembling with disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. Why are you doing this? How could you think this was acceptable? Jessica took a step forward, hands trembling as she held the screwdriver. Dad, it's not what it looks like, she said, her voice faltering under the weight of guilt. We thought we needed help. Help? My chest tightened, and a bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Help? By emptying my house? By stealing everything I have? By destroying the life Emily and I built? My voice rose, resonating with a pain so deep it surprised even me. Daniel remained silent, his face pale and rigid. I could see the hesitation, the fear, but it was too late for fear. The damage had been done. The trust between us had been shattered. A priceless bond fractured beyond repair. I remembered holding him as a baby, rocking him to sleep during long nights, whispering promises that I would always protect him. And now he had chosen betrayal over love, theft over family. I walked toward the truck, each step measured but heavy with emotion. I needed to see with my own eyes the full extent of what they had taken. My hands brushed over the blankets covering the boxes, each touch sending a pang of sorrow through my heart. I lifted a corner and saw Emily's china set, gifted to me on our 25th anniversary, carefully wrapped and ready to be sold. The delicate porcelain seemed fragile enough to shatter with the slightest pressure, just like the bond between us, just like the family I had trusted blindly. I remembered our anniversary dinners, Emily in her favorite dress, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes as she laughed at my terrible attempts at cooking. Daniel had been at the table, his youthful energy bright and uncontained, bouncing from one story to another, filling the room with joy, and now that joy had been replaced with treachery, the antique lamps caught my attention again. Emily and I had spent hours wandering that old thrift district, examining each lamp, imagining how it would light our home. We had argued good-naturedly over which one to buy, laughing at our own stubbornness. And now they were gone, packed in a truck, as if the memories they symbolized had no value at all. I turned to face Daniel and Jessica, my eyes blazing with pain. This isn't just furniture. These aren't just objects. These are pieces of our lives, pieces of history, pieces of love. And you have decided to take them without my permission, without my knowledge. Do you even understand what this means? Jessica's eyes filled with tears, and Daniel finally spoke, his voice weak and wavering. Dad, things have been tough for us lately. We thought this would help. I laughed bitterly, a sound that tasted like ash in my mouth. Tough? And that gives you the right to rob your own father? To strip away a lifetime of memories because your life is inconvenient? Do you even hear yourselves? They avoided my gaze, shame and fear written across their faces. But words could no longer undo the reality of what had happened. The boxes, the truck, the open door, it all spoke louder than anything they could say. I remember the first time Daniel had fallen off his bike and scraped his knee. I had rushed to him, cradling him in my arms, whispering that everything would be all right. I had soothed his fears, wiped away tears, and promised to always be there for him. And yet, here he was, standing before me, violating that trust in the most profound way imaginable. I felt tears streaming down my face, hot and bitter. My hands shook as I pointed toward the truck. Look at this, I said, voice breaking. Every item here tells a story. Every piece holds a memory, and you thought it was acceptable to take me all of it while I was away. Do you even understand the pain you've caused? Daniel's shoulders slumped, his hands hanging limply by his sides. Jessica bit her lip, unable to meet my gaze. The silence stretched on, deafening and unbearable. I realized then that this was not a moment of anger alone. It was a moment of reckoning, a turning point that would define our relationship forever. I had loved them, trusted them, and believed in them. And now that trust was gone, replaced with disbelief and grief. As I stood there staring at the truck, at the box, at the evidence of my son and daughter-in-law's betrayal, I understood something fundamental. My life would never be the same again. The house, the memories, the trust, they were all in peril, and the road ahead would be one of confrontation, of truth, and of facing the people I had loved most with eyes wide open to their true intentions. In that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened next, I would not allow myself to be broken completely. This betrayal had wounded me, but it had not yet destroyed me. And as I wiped the tears from my face and took a deep breath, I prepared myself for the confrontation that would follow. A confrontation that would reveal not just the truth of their actions, but the truth of their hearts. The air around me was thick with tension, heavy enough that it felt almost physical. The moving truck loomed behind Daniel and Jessica, like a silent witness to their betrayal. I could hear the faint creak of its doors swinging in the breeze, the faint rustle of blankets covering the boxes inside, each sound echoing in my mind like a drumbeat of treachery. I had always thought of home as a sanctuary, a place of safety and love. Today, it was the scene of the ultimate violation. I crossed the driveway slowly, my hands trembling at my sides, fists clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. The closer I got, the more aware I became of the sheer magnitude of what they had done. This wasn't a simple mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, calculated act, executed with patience and cunning. And the perpetrators were my own son and his wife. Daniel took a step toward me, his expression a mix of guilt and desperation, but instinctively I stepped back. That small act of physical separation seemed to hurt him more than any words I could have spoken. His eyes flicked to Jessica, and I could see the unspoken exchange between them, a silent confirmation that they had been planning this together, that this betrayal had been premeditated. Dad, Daniel started, his voice low, shaky, almost pleading. We, we just what? I interrupted sharply, my voice rising with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Just steal from your own father? Just betray the trust that's lasted your entire life? Just destroy everything Emily and I built? Jessica stepped forward, the screwdriver still clutched in her hand. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. Dad, we thought, we were helping, she said, her voice breaking under the weight of shame and fear. We just, we didn't know how else to manage. Helping? I laughed bitterly, a sound that was hollow and ragged. Helping? By breaking into my house while I was away? By packing up my life into a truck? By treating my memories, my family history, like it was nothing? My words cut through the air like shards of glass. Do you even understand what you've done? Daniel swallowed hard, his Adam's apple moving visibly as he tried to form words. Things have been tough for us lately, he said finally. Financially, emotionally. We thought we thought this might help us survive. Survive? I repeated incredulously, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. And that gives you the right to rob me, to betray your own father? Do you hear yourself? They both flinched under the intensity of my gaze, but neither spoke. Their silence was deafening, a tacit admission of guilt that confirmed everything my instincts had already told me. This wasn't about need or desperation. This was about greed, calculation, and the shocking realization that the people I loved most had crossed a line I thought was sacred. I walked closer to the truck, my eyes scanning the contents with painful clarity. Each box, each piece of furniture, each object told a story of a life that was being dismantled before me. The antique lamp from our thrift store adventures, the side table passed down from my father, Emily's cherished china set, all of it packed, labeled, ready to be removed as if it were nothing more than trash. I remembered the nights Emily and I had spent polishing that china, carefully washing each piece, admiring its delicate craftsmanship. I remembered the laughter, the warmth, the love that filled our home, and now all of it had been stripped away, without my consent, by the people I had trusted most. You realize, I said, my voice shaking but steady with anger, that what you've done is not just theft, it's a violation, a betrayal of everything a father and son of family are supposed to be. Do you understand that? Daniel's head dropped slightly, and I could see tears welling in his eyes. We didn't mean to hurt you, he whispered. We thought we had no choice. No choice, I repeated, disbelief and fury colliding inside me. You had every choice. You could have asked, spoken to me, shared your struggles. Instead, you chose to steal, to deceive, to betray your own father. Jessica's tears began to flow freely, streaming down her face as she dropped the screwdriver to the ground. We thought you wouldn't understand. We were scared, she admitted. I stepped back, my chest heaving as I fought to control my emotions. Rage and sorrow waged a war inside me, each heartbeat pounding with the intensity of betrayal. I realized in that moment that the confrontation was not just about words, it was about reclaiming control, about asserting the dignity and authority that had been so brazenly violated. I turned back to the truck, lifting a corner of a blanket to inspect the contents more closely. There were boxes labeled with my handwriting, things I had meticulously cataloged over the years, now lying in chaos. Emily's favorite books, Daniel's childhood toys, mementos of birthdays and holidays, all packed and ready to be taken away. This is your answer, I said finally, my voice low but firm, pointing toward the truck. Look at this. Everything you see here is a piece of my life, and you have decided, without my permission, without a single word of explanation, to remove it from my home. How do you justify that? Daniel looked away, guilt and shame etched on his face. Jessica's lips trembled as she tried to find the words. but there were none that could erase the reality of what had been done. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I loved you, I said, my voice breaking. I trusted you. And now I have to understand that the son I raised, the boy I comforted, has chosen betrayal over love, theft over family. The weight of the confrontation pressed down on all of us. A crushing reminder of the fragility of trust and the consequences of choices made in desperation or greed. And as I stood there staring at the moving truck, the half-packed boxes, and the two people who had shattered my world, I knew that the path forward would be difficult, painful, and irreversible. This confrontation was just the beginning. The truth had been revealed, the betrayal exposed, and the reckoning was only just beginning. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing with certainty. I would face it with clarity, dignity, and a resolve born of years of love, loss, and life's harsh lessons. The afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across my driveway and the open back of the moving truck. The weight of betrayal pressed on me like a living thing. Daniel and Jessica stood frozen, their faces pale and tight with fear and guilt. I could see it in their eyes, the fear of exposure, the shame that comes with being caught. But it was too late for fear or shame to undo the damage. I took a deep breath, fighting to steady my shaking hands. My voice, when I spoke, was trembling, yet resolute. "There is one question," I said slowly, deliberately. "Just one question, and I want the truth. I need the truth more than anything else right now. Is this the first time?" Daniel's head fell, eyes darting away, unable to meet mine. Jessica's lips quivered, and she bit her lower lip, staring at the ground. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. And in that moment, I understood everything I needed to know. This was not an impulsive act of desperation. This was not a one-time mistake, born of financial strain or confusion. This was deliberate, calculated, rehearsed, planned. And it had been going on longer than I dared to imagine. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, this isn't the first time." The words struck me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, my knees threatened to buckle, and for a moment I felt the air leave my lungs. Betrayal had many forms, but this one was the deepest, most cutting imaginable. The son I had raised, the boy I had protected and nurtured, had been stealing from me, deceiving me, violating the trust we had built over decades. And he had been doing it for longer than I could bear to realize. Jessica stepped forward, her face pale and streaked with tears. We didn't know how to tell you," she said, her voice trembling. "We were scared. Scared you wouldn't understand. Scared of your anger. Scared of losing you." I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow, raw, and filled with disbelief. "Scared? You think fear excuses theft? You think fear justifies betrayal? Every time I see what's been taken, I remember every memory attached to it, every moment we shared, every story you have now decided doesn't matter." I turned toward the truck again, inspecting the carefully packed boxes, each item a testament to a life now desecrated. There was the antique lamp from our thrift store adventures, the sideboard passed down from my father, Emily's cherished china, and even the old radio that had belonged to my mother. Each object carried decades of history, and each one had been violated, removed without consent, without a single conversation. I could feel the tears streaming down my face, hot and unforgiving. The sorrow was different from grief. It was betrayal made tangible. It was the sting of realizing that love and trust had been replaced by calculation and greed. And as I looked at Daniel, I saw the conflict in his eyes, the guilt, the shame, but also the stubbornness, the childish hope that somehow I would forgive and forget. "You don't understand," he said, his voice cracking. We thought if we did it before telling you, it would be easier. We didn't want to fight. We didn't want to lose you. I shook my head slowly, tears falling freely now. "You already lost me the moment you decided to take what wasn't yours. You lost me the moment you planned to violate every boundary, every principle I taught you. You lost me the moment you thought your fear, your need, could outweigh love, trust, and family." Jessica's hands trembled as she reached out, almost pleading. "Dad, Please, we were wrong. We can fix this. We can. No, I snapped, my voice slicing through the tension. There is nothing to fix. The trust is gone, the betrayal is done, and the consequences are real. You have not only stolen objects, you have stolen memories, shattered bonds, and proven that the son I raised is capable of treachery. That is not something that can be fixed with apologies. I could see their despair, the panic rising as the gravity of the moment settled in. But my own pain was too deep, too real to allow forgiveness or immediate reconciliation. I had to process, to reclaim control, to face the truth fully before taking any next step. I stepped closer, my gaze fixed firmly on Daniel. Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand that this isn't just about furniture or money? It's about decades of trust, of family, of love, and all of it has been violated, all of it. He swallowed hard, nodding weakly, but his eyes told me nothing. Nothing could undo the knowledge I now carried, that my own son had deliberately, repeatedly betrayed me. I turned to Jessica, her face pale and tear-streaked. And you, I said, my voice quieter now but equally cutting, complicit in this act. You knew, you helped, you encouraged, you allowed this to happen. How can you justify standing there and calling this family? She had no answer, only silence. I turned back toward the truck, my gaze sweeping over the stolen items once more. Each object was a wound, a reminder of a past that had been violated, a testament to the life Emily and I had built and nurtured. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. While the material possessions could eventually be reclaimed, the trust, the bond, and the sense of security I had felt toward my son would never be the same again. The betrayal had cut deep, leaving a scar that would not fade. And yet, amidst the overwhelming pain, a faint spark of resolve ignited within me. I could not change the past, but I could take action now. I could confront, protect what remained, and ensure that the deception, the greed, and the violation would not continue unchecked. Your actions, I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm of emotion inside me, have consequences, and you will face them. I will make sure of that. This is not the end of this story. It is only the beginning of reckoning. I could see the fear in their eyes now, the realization that they had crossed a line from which there was no return. And as I turned away from the truck, taking a deep breath to steady my shaking body, I knew that the road ahead would be painful, difficult, and irrevocable. But one thing was certain. The truth had been revealed, the betrayal exposed, and justice, whatever form it would take, was inevitable. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson. Shadows stretched long across the driveway, the moving truck, and the scattered boxes that held pieces of my life. The air was heavy with the scent of dust, paint, and the faint tang of metal from the tools that had been abandoned. Silence, except for the sound, uneven breathing of Daniel and Jessica, filled the space. It was a silence born of guilt, fear, and the slow realization that their betrayal had changed everything. I stood in the middle of the driveway, my heart still pounding, my hands shaking, but my mind clearer than it had been in hours. Rage, grief, and disbelief had surged through me, threatening to consume me entirely. But beneath all of that, something else had taken root. A quiet, unwavering resolve. I could not undo the past. I could not erase the fact that the people I loved most had tried to steal from me. But I could control what happened next. I could reclaim my life, my home, my dignity. Daniel, Jessica, I said, my voice low and steady, carrying a weight that seemed to press down on them. Your actions have consequences. You need to understand that. I will not allow this to continue. I will not allow the destruction of my life to go unchecked. They exchanged glances, eyes wide, breathing uneven. The realization that I would act, not react, not yell, not plead, was sinking in. This was not the frightened, weak man who had once tolerated small betrayals, small deceits. This was a man who had been pushed to the edge and had found the strength to reclaim control. I turned toward the truck, inspecting the chaos one last time. Boxes were scattered, some toppled over, their contents spilling slightly. Furniture, books, lamps, photographs, all reminders of a life carefully built and now violated. I could see Emily's china set, still perfectly wrapped in soft cloth, a silent witness to decades of love. I could see the antique lamps, their delicate frames glinting in the sunlight, and the old radio, scratched and worn, yet holding memories of my father's voice and the songs of my youth. I knew what I had to do. The first step was to secure my property, to ensure that nothing else could be taken. I called the authorities, my hands steady now, my voice firm. I explained the situation, detailing the theft, the attempted break-in, and the deliberate planning. I provided names, descriptions, and evidence, refusing to allow my emotions to cloud the facts. As I spoke, Daniel and Jessica's faces paled further, realizing that there would be no escape, no easy resolution. The gravity of their actions was finally settling in. The betrayal they had committed, the trust they had shattered, was not something that could be smoothed over with apologies or excuses. When the authorities arrived, the confrontation was quiet but deliberate. I led them to the truck, showed them the boxes, the furniture, the items that had been packed without consent. I explained everything step by step, leaving nothing to interpretation. The officers listened carefully, taking notes, photographing the evidence, and speaking in calm, professional tones that carried a sense of finality. Daniel and Jessica were questioned separately. I watched them through the lens of my own pain, my anger tempered by clarity. They were no longer my son and daughter-in-law in that moment. They were perpetrators of a calculated violation, and they would have to face the consequences. It was a painful realization, but one I accepted fully. Love, trust, and family could not exist alongside deliberate betrayal. Once the authorities had taken statements, I walked slowly back toward the house. The door, which had been the center of the conflict, now stood before me as a symbol of resilience, rather than vulnerability. I inserted my key into the lock, turning it with deliberate care. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing the familiar interior of my home. Everything had been touched, moved, and partially packed, but it still belonged to me. I walked through the rooms, touching surfaces, feeling the familiar textures of my life. The sideboard from my father's home, Emily's favorite chair, the dining table where Daniel had grown up. All of it still existed, still mine to reclaim. I paused in the living room, gazing at the walls adorned with photographs, paintings, and memories. The pain of betrayal was still present, but it was tempered by a sense of control, of reclamation. Sitting down in Emily's favorite chair, I allowed myself to breathe. Tears came again, but they were different this time. Not just grief, but a release, a recognition that I had survived something unimaginable. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and the violation of trust, and I had not been broken. I was still whole, still capable of love, still capable of moving forward. Later that evening, Daniel and Jessica attempted to approach me. Their faces were pale, their eyes filled with a mixture of shame, fear, and a hope that perhaps reconciliation was possible. I looked at them, my gaze steady and unwavering. "There are lessons you need to learn," I said quietly. "Trust cannot be stolen or demanded. It must be earned. And right now you have much to reflect upon." I made it clear that while I would pursue legal action to recover what had been taken, I was not closing the door completely on family. But the path forward would be long, filled with hard truths and necessary boundaries. Forgiveness would be a journey, not an immediate gift. That night, as I sat in the quiet of my home, I reflected on the events of the day. The sun had set completely now, leaving the sky a deep navy blue, the stars beginning to appear in their silent, distant glory. I realized that life was unpredictable, that betrayal could come from the most unexpected places, even from those we love most. But I also realized that resilience, clarity, and resolve could withstand even the deepest wounds. I had lost trust, yes. I had been hurt, yes, but I had reclaimed my home, my dignity, and my sense of self. And in that moment, I knew that while the scars of betrayal would remain, they would not define me. I would rebuild, stronger and wiser, honoring the life I had shared with Emily and the values I held dear. The moving truck, the boxes, the betrayal, they were behind me now. The door of my house closed with a soft click, symbolizing not just an end, but a new beginning. I was ready to face the days ahead, to live fully again, and to protect what remained sacred in my life, the memories, the love, and the home that was mine. The reckoning had come and I had faced it head on. I was Richard Miller, a father, a widower, a man who had survived betrayal and heartbreak, and I would continue to survive, to live, and to protect the life I had built with unwavering strength.